Hello and welcome to Adoption Pop with Hello and welcome to Adoption Pop, where a podcast journalist,
filmmaker,
and a cultural critic burst pop culture's favorite adoption tropes.
Because we're adopted.
Question for both of you. Who is the friend whose TV or movie recommendations do you trust the most?
I know what friend is not.
What? Are you going to name and shame? I was going to say, I feel like Sullivan's setting me up here, so I have to say her, because I do. I have to say Sullivan.
I was not looking for the compliment.
Okay. Well, I will compliment you. It's you for me.
Okay.
It is not Sullivan. It is my... I mean, if I need a good book, I'm going to call Sullivan.
You don't read books.
I do. I know how to read.
No, I didn't say you didn't know how to read.
I do read books. They just take me so long to get through. Okay. All right. Okay. It is one of my best friend's husband. Whenever he gives me a TV recommendation, it's always good.
Okay.
No, but who's the one that gives you bad recommendations?
Never mind. It doesn't matter. That was not the question.
Okay, fair.
Sullivan, back to you.
Today we have another listener recommendation. This one comes from Candace, who said we really ought to do HBO's Task. Well, Candace, ask and ye shall receive. The series Task premiered on HBO in September of 2025, and it follows FBI agent Tom Brandis as he leads a task force investigating a string of violent robberies against stash houses run by an outlaw motorcycle gang. Brandis, we learn, is a former priest, a current alcoholic, and deep in the denial stage of grief, having not yet recovered from his wife's murder at the hands of their adopted son, who is in prison awaiting sentencing. There is a lot going on in this series. In true adoption pop fashion, we're going to stick with just the adoptee storyline here, and we're going to spoil the hell out of it. Haley, what did you think of Task?
I loved this series, and so it was a great delight to get to watch it again to prepare for our conversation today. And I'm so glad we get to finally talk about it. I've seen a lot of adoptees talking about the representation in this show also online. And so I think for all the people, they're ready to hear what we think of their adoptee representation in Task. What do you guys think of it?
I also really, really liked it. It was the first kind of series in a while where I was captivated right away and wanted to watch the next one.
Yeah, I did too. I really loved this. This show is like everything that I love in a television show. Very dramatic. A lot of I like murder. No laughter ever. Like this is just like everything.
I like murder.
Everything I look for in a TV show.
No laughter ever. That has me. You're funny.
I thought there were some moments of levity though in this show that like helped it along, but like, is that okay?
Levity's okay. Okay. Well, we said there's a lot to get through. Even sticking solely with the adoptee storylines, there's a lot to get through in this show. This is actually a 7-episode series, though, which has been renewed for a second season, by the way. I've heard. So we're gonna get season 2 of Task at some point.
Yes.
Yeah. It was renewed. Series premiered in September. It was renewed in November. So this is S1 of Task. But Haley, do you wanna kick us off and sort of talk about the adoptees in this movie?
Okay, so we, as Sullivan said, we are spoiling this whole show. So if you don't like spoilers, come back after you've seen Task. So Emily and Ethan are the adoptees. They are adopted. It doesn't say exactly when, but they were in foster care. They were in the care of their future adoptive parents for 2 years before the adoption was decided upon and finalized. And so we see Emily as a character, and I think she's in high school, and Ethan is in jail awaiting sentencing and for the murder of their adoptive mother. And so we're really following the dad for the majority of the series, Tom, and we see these glimpses of the other characters. Ethan's very much like his presence is only that there's this underlying tension surrounding this upcoming sentencing hearing in which the family has been invited to give a victim impact statement. And there's it's a great deal of tension around that, like all throughout. So we see in the very first episode that Tom does not visit his son, Ethan, and he goes to jail to drop off a suit for the sentencing hearing, and he doesn't go in, even when he's invited to do so because he's there at the right time. And I feel a lot of things. I should stop talking because I want to hear what you guys are thinking about these things too.
We should add also that it comes out pretty early on that Ethan has some mental health issues and was off his medication at the time. And also there is a biological sibling in the house as well. Their older sister, Sarah, is Tom and his late wife's biological child, who is close in age, I think, to Ethan and Emily, though she is a bit older. And so that dynamic also is at play here that will come in further. But I'm with you, Haley. When he dropped off the suit in jail and they ask him and he says no, he doesn't want to go in. And you learn that it's 14 months since he's visited his son. Or he hasn't visited at all. His son has been in prison in jail awaiting sentencing for 14 months, and he's never visited him. Is I found really, really heartbreaking. The other thing that we see early on is Emily meeting with her school psychologist. I'm curious what the two of you thought about that meeting.
I had a lot of thoughts around this, and Emily is open talking about her dad's drinking, and the sort of my thought with this was, why, when we are adopted, are there not follow-up visits throughout our life to check in that like we're okay? No answers.
Yes, there should be follow-ups. And Emily and Ethan were adopted as older children. And also, there's no agency there in that that adults have all the say, right? So whether or not you're adopted as an infant or older child, yes, and like most families don't have anybody checking in unless there's something really terrible going on and someone calls Child Protective Services, right? So yes, agreed that there should be follow-ups. And to your point about Tom's drinking, it's like, yeah, like he's like the most sympathetic alcoholic I've ever seen, because his wife died and his son killed her accidentally, or on purpose. But yeah, as Sullivan, he's off his meds, there's mental health issues. Like, this is terrible. It's just a terrible situation for everybody. I found Tom to be the most likable adoptive father that we've, and in all the things we've covered to date, he's been the most likable, and his behavior is not great at home. Where she shares about having to bring her dad to like help him to bed because he's so stumbling drunk and out of it.
We really see Emily feel like she's in the middle, right? Because they're asking her, does she intend to make a victim impact statement? And she's very torn. She shares that she is afraid at times of her brother and when her brother is around because he struggles with mental health. And also she says that she's afraid if she doesn't say anything on his, on behalf of him, in support of him at the sentencing, that it's like abandoning him. And given the family dynamic, she's really feeling like she is all he has. And yet, you know, I couldn't help but think, and we've talked about this before on the pod, like, who was there for Emily? Outside of the school psychologist, which seems like, visits periodically and the psychologist is doing her job. But beyond that, I thought, gosh, she doesn't really have anybody there for her.
I loved that they showed that loyalty to Ethan because they were the only ones that had each other all along. And so, when we talk about, foster care and placement, like placing sibling groups together is so important just because of that. Like that's your one bio connection they have intact. And so I was so thankful, but yeah, this pulling of loyalties, and it is so challenging. I'm just rooting for her. And I was so glad she had a psychologist, frankly, because it felt like the only person who was really on her side.
We do get a flashback also of when they came home, essentially, when this was going to be their permanent placement, and a flashback to Tom and his wife having this conversation about kind of should we or shouldn't we adopt these siblings. And the wife says, well, Tom says, are you sure? And his wife says, who's going to love them more than we are? And I really thought about that because you have a situation here. I'm curious what the two of you felt about the portrayal of Ethan. Even though we don't see him much in this series, the portrayal of a former foster youth, an adoptee, as not simply having mental health struggles, but having struggles so serious that he actually kills somebody else.
It got me thinking, well, what are the stats of adoptees and incarceration? And what are the stats of adoptees and mental health? We know that there are some out there and that we're overrepresented in, having addictions and things like that. So I don't think it was inaccurate. And then also, are they representing him fairly? I think they did a pretty good job. I think that they really did evoke a lot of compassion for his condition and what he had done. I didn't feel like, of course, there's the sister Sarah villainizes him and that, but the way I think that Tom really did a good job at reminding everybody that he had a mental illness and that it really was beyond him that this happened.
Yeah, we'll put in the show notes some resources out there that speak to exactly what you just said, Crystal. The stats around, not just stats, but support, continued support needed for adoptees and also for former foster youth as well. I agree with you. I thought that the portrayal was very compassionate. I thought it was accurate given the statistics that are out there in the overrepresentation of adopted people and former foster youth in residential care facilities and in prisons, in jails as well. It broke my heart a bit because I think a lot of people already assume that former foster youth are damaged, right? And like adoptees are damaged people. I had a conversation with someone really recently who was talking about wanting to foster to adopt an older child, so from the foster care system, and her friends were counseling her against it because older kids come with so many problems. And this idea, then conversely, she had no thoughts of adopting an infant. That's not what she wanted to do. But from her friends' minds, infants are blank slates, which I tried to explain to her, that infants are blank slate stuff got debunked like decades and decades and decades ago. It's patently untrue. The reason why former foster youth and adoptees are overrepresented in all of these places are systemic failures. They're not, there's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with kids in foster care. There's nothing wrong with former adoptees. These are systemic issues that we have no control over, that manifest themselves in different ways. And so there are a lot of organizations out there who are working really, really hard to make sure that that foster youth get the support and the permanency that they need.
I think too, we also see that mainstream media will pick up stories like this if there is ever adoption, if there's an adoptee who has attacked adoptive parents, murdered adoptive parents, like that is highlighted in the article. And there's and I know because I have a lot of Google alerts set, there's always like some paragraph about like, and they went to Ukraine and took them home from the orphanage and they gave everything, and right. And it's just like framing the do-gooding instead of the lack of supports for parenting children who may have higher needs. I really liked seeing this side of the story and the aftermath and those things, and that very gracious piece of all the explanation behind the mental illness and the off medication and all those things to not heighten the stigma, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, adopted or not, you don't know what you're going to get when you have kids. You do not know. And so it's so ridiculous to me when I hear that argument. You just don't know what you're going to get. It's delusional to think that you, by adopting them as an infant, like you might have more control up to a point, but they grow up, they get taller than you. They
don't. Why would you bring that up? I just told them that Isaiah is now taller than me, my oldest child. I don't like to hear that.
So we have a scene, Emily sees the psychologist several times throughout this film, but we have one scene in particular where she talks about needing to feel grateful all the time. How did that scene hit the two of you?
It felt very true for me, but it felt unrealistic in the sense that I don't think I would have had the words at that time in my adolescence to voice that. So she's clearly has a deep sense of self-awareness, and I love her for that. And I love that they wrote that in the show like that.
She says, I'm so grateful, really. I'm so grateful that they adopted us. But I don't know sometimes. I think that's all I'm ever allowed to feel, gratitude. Like, God forbid I ever get annoyed or pissed. I'm supposed to feel so lucky that I got a second chance. And then the psychologist says, you didn't ask to be a part of this family. They chose to adopt you and Ethan. Then why do I feel like I constantly have to apologize for their decision? I loved this so much. I agree, Crystal. Would I have had the language to say these things in high school? Certainly not. But as an adult, when I say these things out loud, it is still not accepted, not appropriate. It's very like, but. Like, this is not accepted by Gen Pop. Like, this is like, well, like, right. But you have a lot to be grateful for, though. Like, expressing any kind of negative attitude about adoption just feels very unwelcome. It still in my community, with the people that I talk to regularly.
I'm going to take us away for just a moment from Emily and Ethan, because there's one other character we should talk about, because he does become important later in the scene. I mentioned at the top that this show really revolves around Tom, who is an FBI agent. He is running a task force hunting down drug dealers and people breaking into homes. And again, there's a lot of murder. And in that, there is a missing child. There was a drug home that gets broken into. There is a young child in that home, and that young child disappears. And so another storyline throughout is the search for, his name is Sam. And Sam is probably 5-ish, 5 or 6.
Yes, I think they say he's 6. Yeah.
Okay. Sam is 6. And so there is a search for Sam. Sam is in fact found. He's located. He is okay. I should say also he is taken after he's sort of discovered in this house. The people raiding the house didn't know he was there, and they actually take him out of an act of compassion, which, that's a half spoil. I think when you watch the show, it makes you, it is very clearly an act of compassion that they take Sam, but then have to figure out what are they going to do with him. Sam's parents are dead. And so Sam is found, and Sam then goes into the system, as he doesn't have parents. And so we have this scene also where Sam ostensibly should be in a home for kids, because he doesn't have parents. He does not have a foster placement as of yet. And in fact, we find out he's in a youth detention center. And I did a little research on that, because I had this vague notion that, so much of this show is true and it's real, and we've talked about it's really resonant. Again, we'll put in the show notes, but because of the lack of foster placements in many states in the U.S., kids are housed in detention centers. They're housed in jails. They're housed in casinos in some cases. And so it's really heartbreaking in this show to see this little boy, 6-year-old, who's done nothing wrong. And he's in a detention center.
It looks like a jail. Like, it is, it looks, it's so institutional. All of it. It looks, and to see he's not the only one in there, but he's playing by himself. And so they have some kids' items there, like he's playing with Lego, but to see these kids, like, it's brutal. It's so brutal. I've talked about this a little bit, maybe years ago on Adoptees On, where I had planned to adopt, because that was like you got to pay it back. You're grateful, and you got to pay back this good deed that was done to you, the rescue. And so Nick and I went through some training courses, either we did the international adoption course, we did a foster parenting course, we did several about infant adoption. And so all the things that are presented, this was 20 years ago, all the things that were presented to us were very much like older kids, trauma, bad, hard. Infants, much easier. And so all the things we were taking were like pushing us towards infant adoption, which is for profit, the majority of cases. And so I think all of these campaigns they have to look for more foster care parents and to have families available to take in kids the instant they come into care are perhaps putting folks in line like we were to like learn more about it and then get scared and be like, oh, I guess we better try get a baby, And so that's really heartbreaking to know that that's really happening, that these young kids are going into institutions. Like, that's brutal. We see Tom goes in and sees him in there and is like, yeah, I just couldn't leave him. And so Tom takes Sam home because he still has his certification, whatever you need to be a foster parent from when Ethan and Emily were in their care. And so Tom takes Sam home and Sam sleeps in Ethan's bedroom.
Were you guys like, oh, hell no, you're not going to adopt this kid and replace Ethan, are you? I was yelling at the TV at this point in time. Oh, that's not what happened.
This is another case where we see, this seems to be a theme in these shows and these movies, where we see the children really acting as the adult, because Tom comes home with Sam and he's just sort of like, and his daughters are there. Emily and Sarah are there. And in walks Dad with this little boy. And it's just sort of like, this is Sam, he's got some Legos, helping with his Legos. And they're like, wait a minute. Like,
what are you doing?
Who is this child? Yeah. What are you doing? Like, who is this child and what is going on?
It's like, did you just find him and you didn't bring him yet to the authorities? Like it very much felt like a lost puppy. Like, oh my goodness. Yeah. His daughters are like, no, Dad, this is not it. But I believe Sam stays in their care for quite a while.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm curious, Crystal, if you want to talk about it. I was curious about your take on this arc we see Sarah and Emily go on together as, again, the adopted daughter and the biological daughter as sisters, because you're the only one of the three of us that was raised in a home with siblings who are the biological children of your adoptive parents.
Yeah, I have a few thoughts on this. So I really enjoyed seeing the closeness between Sarah and Emily and them defending each other when Tom kind of snaps at them, and you see this familiarity and this that they grew up together, sort of, right? And so I really appreciated that. Definitely I experienced that in my own home. And when you've heard people say, or adoptive parents say, and I hear this all the time, that there's no difference. There's no difference between the adopted child and the biological child. And I really thought about it, and I thought, you know what? I believe them. I believe adoptive parents when they say that. I really do. But I think where it's problematic for me is that there is a difference when you're sitting where we sit, there is a difference. And I felt that difference. And when you say that to me, that dismisses my experience and it negates my experience. So that was sort of my thought on that, but also watching Sarah have these conversations with Tom and feeling possessive, protective over her dad against these adopted children, and the language that she used when talking to her dad, saying, you know, her brother, Emily's brother, killed your wife, and using that language to create distance. And that hurt me to hear that. Like it actually was like, oh, that I really felt that for Emily. So I also want to say that Sarah or Emily says when she's in the psychologist's office, and the psychologist says, do you think that Sarah is jealous or wishes that it was back to when she had her parents to herself? Do you recall that part?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that too, and I was wondering, have you ever, and maybe it's different for me because there were biological children there, but have you ever thought or fantasized about what your adoptive family would have been like if you weren't there? And my immediate thought was easier. That's some deep-rooted shit right there.
Well, Crystal, I'm reflecting on you having that experience and sharing that. As you said, Sarah in the film sort of says that, right? Like that if she either says it outright or she indicates it in sort of this discussion that she thinks is private with her dad, but Emily winds up overhearing, like essentially our life would have been better without these children. And, Emily hears that message from Sarah. And to go back to what we talked about, the outside world looks at her and says, you need to be grateful. Like, you are so much better off. This fantasy of people that don't know anything about you or your life or your biological family, even if you don't, whether or not you know about them. But this idea that we are confident you are much better off. What a mixed message for Emily and for so many adoptees to have an adoptive family, even just a single family member, say, life would be better if you weren't here. And the outside world saying, well, you ought to be grateful because your life would be terrible if you weren't here. It's puts them in such a terrible place.
I think a beautiful thing about these podcasts and doing the work that we do is that we get to come into deeper consciousness of the realities of things or people's experiences. And I really think that there is just this unconscious understanding of adoptees, or this like within the adoptive family unit, by saying things like, oh, I love them the same, or they're just the same as my biological kids. Like, okay, yeah, that might be your experience. Fine. And I respect that. And we have to be aware of everybody's experience, and the language that gets used when we're so unconscious about things can be so damaging. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. It feels very hopeless to me at times.
So an answer could be when we're coming towards the end of the film and Ethan is in fact sentenced, and we see the whole family there. And, just before the sentencing happens, Tom tells Emily, we have to speak the truth even when it upsets others, which I think number one is his way of acknowledging, his shortcomings as a father, his inability to talk about his own grief and talk about things, but also inability to hold space for her grief too. And I was happy to hear him say that. And then he does go in and he does speak at Ethan's sentencing. And really, I thought could not have given a more beautiful and poignant speech that says a lot of really hard things and also acknowledges both hard truths and beautiful truths as well, that he didn't just say this to Emily, that you have to speak the truth even when it upsets people, but then he actually acted on that.
I feel like I am tearing up just thinking about this speech. I bawled both times I watched it. It was so beautifully done, as you say, Sullivan, and the compassion and holding someone's humanity and the wholeness of a person. Mental illness does not define a person, and your actions don't define, like, all of those pieces. I was like, oh. And we haven't really touched on it, but Tom's a former priest, and there's all of these themes all the way along of him talking to various characters at a high level about religion or the afterlife or like what happens when you die or forgiveness or all of these things, which was so resonant for me in watching. Like, I picked up on all of these cues all the way along. And so to see his previous experience as a chaplain and priest and helping people in their moments of great crisis and grief, and then him personally not dealing with his wife's passing, come to this point of being able to say these things to Ethan, including, I forgive you. Like, that's the character transformation we all want to see in a TV show. Like, that's why this show was so, so good. If you ever need to cry and you have trouble doing that, I don't know if you guys have that. Like, are there shows or things you go to because you're like, I need to cry and I need, something to induce that? This will be that for me now going forward, is Tom's speech.
I agree. I was really worried when they were putting the burden of the victim impact statement on Emily. And I thought, oh no, they're going to make her do this, and then it's going to further isolate her from the family. Like, if she says something really meaningful and speaks from the heart, and then he gets a less sentence, she's going to be the villain in this. And the fact that Tom did it, it was such a moment of leadership and him stepping into the role that he needed to step into as a father, as a leader. And I thought that they did really well at making sure that he took that on and that it was not left in Emily's hands, because I thought that was way too much of a burden for her.
Yeah, and we didn't really talk about this, but like at the beginning, Sarah, her sister, is so angry that Emily would dare to give an impact statement and stick up for their brother, and because maybe he'll get out sooner, and so she's not dealing well with it. Of course, who would? Someone kills your mother and you have a relationship to him too, and it's so complicated. So the weight that Emily's carrying through this series is so evident. And as adoptees, we're looking at that and saying, she already had a burden before any of the bad things happened. And so it's just the weight just kind of piles on.
So this victim impact statement that Tom gives is actually not the end of the movie, because we still have 6-year-old Sam who is living at their house, and who, by all appearances, Tom appears to be making space for forever in the house. And so we see Tom meeting at the end with a friend of his who is a priest. This is a priest we see periodically throughout the film. And Tom meets with the priest, and the priest, again, that theme of like saying the truth or like saying the really hard thing. The priest says to him, with respect to Tom's bringing Sam home, "You have done a good thing, but is it for the boy or for yourself?" And I thought, I was so happy to hear the priest say that, because, you know, we talk a lot on this pod about, I think our beef with so much of adoption in the media is the inability to hold multiple truths at once. The media seems to like to have one point of view and stick with that. But I thought you've done a good thing, but is it for the boy or for yourself? Just really held those multiple truths at once, because Tom is loving, and we see him be very loving. And Sarah and Emily are both so loving to Sam, and they have given Sam this space to be cared for and loved, which he needed. But you also do, or at least I did, get a sense that, like, I don't know that this is where Sam should be. I don't know. Did you have that sense?
Oh my gosh. With an old dad who's about to launch his last kid into the world and still has a severe drinking problem. No, I don't think he should be raising a 6-year-old. And I was glad he got him out of the detention center. And I was so glad this priest called this thing out. I was trying to look at my notes, and I think the last thing, sorry, notes paper. Be unselfish with your love, Tom. What's best for you may not be what's best for the boy. And I thought, that's the crux, right? For adoptive parents who are hopeful adoptive parents who are hoping to build their family in some way, what's best for you may not be what's best for the child. In Sam's case, parents dead. We hear that he was in external care with his grandmother earlier, but she's got dementia. She's in a home. That's why he went back to his parents. So poor Sam has been bounced around quite a bit. And we meet the family he's going to go to. We see them and are told that this is a permanent for him. And I hope that's true, because we know that that's not always the case. And so I love that thought to end on. Is this for us or for them? What's really best for all the folks involved? Well done, Task. I think you nailed it on season 1. Who's going to be in season 2? Anyway, sorry, I digress.
I know. I was like, who wrote this? Who wrote this? Because they hit, and it wasn't just the priest that posed that question to him. It was also his biological daughter, Sarah, that said, are you using Sam to make up for Ethan? Like, there was such an awareness around his behavior through the whole series. It was so good. It was so good. I did want to mention Sarah and Emily have a conversation, and Sarah says to Emily, "How long have you felt like all you've ever been allowed to feel is gratitude?" And Emily's like, "For a long time." And then Sarah says, "I don't want you to feel like that anymore. Mom wouldn't either." "Oh, you don't want me to feel like that anymore? Okay, I won't then. Thanks."
Maybe don't create an environment in which I have to feel this way.
Right?
Like we're just choosing this. We're choosing to feel that like
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, back to Sam.
No, I think that highlights though the difference between what people desire, like the environment they desire to create and the one they actually create. Right, is two different things, and I think that this show did a really good job of showing that, of giving that example. Crystal, would you like to give an award?
I do, but I just have one more thing I want to say that I'm not sure if the two of you caught, which you probably did because you guys are like so perceptive of these things. But so there's a character who is taking care of two other small children who sort of was caught up in this whole Sam being abducted thing. And Tom is advocating for this character to not get held criminally accountable to this because and says that, you know, we don't need to have two more. We've already had one child lose their parents. We don't need to have another two children lose, you know, their caretaker, basically. And I just thought like that was such a small part of the series, but again, it was just the awareness of the writers. So good. So good. Okay, I'll give the award. This is the Adoption Truth in Writing Award, and it goes to Brad Ingelsby of Task. This award recognizes the most accurate and respectful portrayal of adoptees that we've seen in television and film to date. The writers of Task didn't rely on tropes and sentimentality. Rather, they captured the nuance, tension, and quiet realities of adoption with honesty, care, and rare precision. And for this, we feel seen and we are appreciative.
I love it. Agreed. Adoption Pop is podcast journalist Haley Radke,
filmmaker Crystal Park,
and cultural critic Sullivan Summer. In researching this episode, we relied on Eleanor Bader for Truth Out. Kids awaiting foster care placement are being housed in jails and offices. And Rachel Hinton for the Chicago Sun-Times. State sued for holding foster children in jail due to lack of housing.
If you like what we do, drop us a rating on your podcast app, find and follow us on Instagram and TikTok, and let us know what you want us to cover in future episodes.
Next week, we celebrate Hollywood's biggest night. Join us for the Oscars on Adoption Pop.